And welcome everyone to today's webinar, Best in Class Integrated Management Systems, Integrating QMS, EMS, OHSAS, IT Security, and Social Responsibility, sponsored by Omnex. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest, and your host for today's webinar. Well, you know, there's three key challenges when implementing an integrated management system. The first challenge is integrating a quality management system, an environmental management system, and a health and safety management system. The second challenge is for organizations supplying many different industries who have to conform to multiple quality management systems, such as the General QMS standard ISO 9001, IATF 16949 for automotive, ISO 13485 for medical devices, and or AS 9100 for aerospace. And the third challenge is to ensure that there's standardization throughout the organization. It's important to keep in mind that an integrated management system is not only about integration, but integration and standardization, and that's what today's webinar is all about. Before I introduce today's subject matter expert, I just want to remind you all that you can ask questions to us using the Q&A box. You can find that Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or if you see a green pull-down menu at the top of the screen, click that, and you'll see a Q&A button that you can click to open the Q&A box. A recording of this webinar, as well as a copy of the slides, are going to be made available about a day after we conclude today's presentation. Okay, let's get started. Today's presenter is Chad Keimel, the CTO and founder of Omnex, an international consulting and training organization headquartered in the United States. Over the course of Chad's very successful career, he served on the Malcolm Baldrige Board of Examiners and has received numerous quality achievement awards, including the Quality Professional of the Year Award by the American Society of Quality, the ASQ, Automotive Division in 2005. Chad both developed and teaches management system courses for integrated management systems, ISO 9001, ISO 14001, ISO 27001, and ISO 45001, as well as an integrated management system lead auditor training course. He's also the author of 7 books and more than 100 papers, including several on integrated management systems. So as you can see, we're in very good hands today with our presenter. So Chad Keimel, take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. So we're going to talk about best-in-class integrated management systems, and we have upped the bar just a little bit. I always wonder if, just when the industry is getting caught up with the idea of QMS, EMS, and OHSAS, if I should indeed add IT security and social responsibility to the mix. Well, I go with strong beliefs in terms of what's happening in the marketplace, and really today, whether you like it or not, your IT department is already looking at IT security and is a key top management concern. So with the ISO 27001 having adopted the high-level structure, it integrates very well. And of course, another very key item or methodology or is social responsibility. This is something everybody's implementing. So it behooves us today to not only talk about integration of QMS, EMS, OHSAS, but integrating IT security and social responsibility. Of course, you don't have to do it all at once. You can put it as part of your roadmap. And as I say that, let me just tell you, at Omnex, we like to walk the walk and walk the talk. We have just, for ourselves, implemented integrated management systems with all 5 of these. And we're getting in the process of getting audited to all of these. Of course, you can't do that with social responsibility, but let me move the page and let's go on. Just mentioned to you, Omnex is founded in 1985 in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I won't go through all the different things that have made us who we are today, except to say, we take great pride in having helped write many of the standards. I myself am on the TC 176, which is ISO 9001, the TC 207, which is the 14001, and also the recently adopted 45001. Of course, we're also very much into medical devices. I'm on the medical devices committees, and also in terms of the aerospace, AQG. All right, let's move on. One thing I'd like to mention, over the many years here, by doing key customer initiatives, Omnex has absolutely become global. And I did want to say something to you about myself, maybe a little bit about my own integrated management systems. How did I come to this? Really, till about 2002, we were just, remember, we like to think ourselves about really that we're about business excellence and improvement. We're implementing quality management systems, and we got an opportunity working with Yazaki to help them integrate QMS and ISO 14001. Of course, the QMS we did for them was an automotive QMS, and that was a very successful implementation which got us started on our current path of integrated management systems. Back then, 14001, and really it was ISO TS 16949, did not integrate as well. But let me not spend so much time there, but just to say, I wrote a paper on juggling multiple standards. Mike, I did that with Quality Digest, and then many webinars after about 2004 when I first published the Juggling Multiple Standards article. And in 2015, I published the Integrated Management Systems, a book with the ASQ. Of course, Omnex also does multiple different training courses, integrating 14,000, 45,000, AS9100, 14,000, 45,001. Sometimes customers ask us to integrate AS9100, IATF 16949, and ISO 13485. Folks, all those combinations and permutations actually work. All right, so let's go right into the webinar itself. This is the agenda we had planned for today. I'll start out by talking about the rationale for integrated management systems. Then I'll define an integrated management system. And then very important to an IMS is the idea, what you integrate around is processes and your process approach. Of course, we said it's only one of the three integrations you have to do. But we'll talk to you about the process map, the process flow, and process measurables. And then I'll finish up with best-in-class integrated management systems. All right. What is the rationale for integrated management systems? Folks, I've got a chock-full presentation for you today. I left this in there because it was part of a one day that I did for ASQ in one of their meets a little while ago. I kept it in there so you know what were the learning objectives I have, that we were focused on in each of the sections. I'm not actually going to cover that so much, but I'll leave it there for you to look at. And of course, you're going to get a chance to get this recording, and then you can look at it one more time. Really, the drivers of IMS is, let's go with, which order should I go in? I'll start at the bottom. It is a challenge of the enterprise. Omnex works with many different kinds of companies, from very small family-owned businesses all the way to very large corporations with multiple sites. And really, even if you get to a size of 3 or 4, the challenge of the enterprise is really how do we manage, even Omnex today is in, we have about 15 or 16 different sites. And how do we ensure common set of practices, processes, methodologies, globally? And definitely, one of the ways to do it is really integrated management systems. Then, of course, the cost. Before the cost, let's go with the proliferation of standards. The number of standards we have to do is just increasing. I'll talk to you about that. And with this proliferation of standards is coming the cost of maintaining. The cost of implementing is nothing compared to the cost of maintaining it. And then, of course, we got a great blessing with this high-level structure. Both the QMS, EMS, OHSAS, and IT security now have the same high-level structure, helping us integrate, integration into processes. So those are the factors that really are the IMS drivers. So let's step through these four ideas in terms of, helping us with this IMS. One, of course, is the Annex SL. The Annex SL, it came out of the ISO body itself, seeing this proliferation, wanted to help companies, and they came up with the idea of saying, hey, you need to have the same structure, and you have to have the same definition between standards so that companies can really do integrated management systems. So it was purposely thought out that this NXSL came up with a high-level structure. And folks, this is the high-level structure. If you have attended other Omnex webinars, we have covered this in great detail. But if you have studied this as part of ISO 9001 or ISO 14001, you have seen this high-level structure and this clause numbering. All right, this is something you may not know, and I don't see a lot of people talking about it, so let me do it, which is, the ISO standards themselves require integration. Here is from 5.1c. This is for leadership and commitment. Let's look at the word. It says, ensuring the integration of the quality management system into the organization's business process. Then 14,001 says the same, integration of the environmental management system. The information security says, ensure that the resources for the integrated management are available. Well, they quoted the wrong section for me and I didn't catch it. Next one is ensuring the integration of the health and safety management system into the organization's business process. This requirement de facto is pushing us into an integrated management systems. In fact, it'll soon, at some point, become a non-conformance from your registrar's auditor if you don't do integrated management system, because this is an edict to top management that they need to do this. Of course, what do we have on top of that? A proliferation of standards. Depending on the industry you're in, you're implementing multiple standards. You're implementing, a good set of these depending on who you are. And, the number of standards we have to implement varies whether you're in the, general manufacturing, whether you're automotive, whether you're aerospace, your medical devices, and some of you are a combination of them. Of course, along with this is this growing expectations in terms of the sustainability and social responsibility. You may or may not know, it is a pet subject of mine that I write off and on and I present about the integration of social responsibility. So, typically, if you do see me in a number of different spaces, it is really my interests. These interests are driving me in doing my work and my research into these areas. So this is something I do with Dr. Wayne Visser, who is a professor out of from Europe. And look at these number of different standards. You may not know this. Some of you already signed up for some of these social responsibility standards. All right. And then, of course, in terms of the drivers of integrated management systems, we say the challenge of the enterprise, the plants, the corporate headquarters, the design center, the sales offices. And of course, how do we manage this multi-site, multilingual, multicultural, multi-standards, process globally. Let me say this because, you know, we've been around for a long time and helping companies with their suppliers. I oftentimes hear these words from the customer. The customer says, you know, XYZ, companies that you're working with, Chad, Omnex is working with, you know, they're not the same company as in the US. When I go to China or I go to India or I go to Europe, they're different companies. Well, if you want to meet this challenge of the enterprise, really, you know, along with the proliferation of standards, along with the cost, and it is really implementing an integrated management system. All right, hopefully, you know, I get a chance. I don't really talk a lot about cost savings in here, but let me just say it right up front. The biggest reason you may want to adopt integrated management systems is really it saves money. And please download the article, which is an executive primer that we attached to the last article in the Quality Digest. And it will give you the cost savings that we defined for companies. All right, so what we'll do now, we talked about the motivation to go into integrated management systems in the last chapter or last section. In this section, what we'll do is we'll define what is an IMS. We want to make sure, folks, you really understand what is an IMS before you start. Let me tell you why. When I ask companies, are you integrated, they always say yes. And then I look inside their system and they're not. So how do you really recognize what you are? So let's try to understand. Number one, folks, you need to have integrated processes, integrated risks, and integrated audits. Let me say this. Many times when people talk to me about integration, they call me and say, hey, Chad, can Omnex do integrated auditing course for us? We're going to start doing integrated audits. And folks, really, you cannot do an integrated audit of a system that's not integrated. How do you save money in integrated audits? Well, you can reduce the amount of time significantly because the same process is serving QMS, EMS, OHSAS, or IT security. So if you sample it once, you're sampling all four of them. You understand? So that's how you reduce your time and reduce your cost in integrated audits. It's a good idea, but you got to have an integrated process in the first place, or you still have to audit all four of those processes. All right, so now let's remember this. I'll remind you in the very end. An integrated management system is integrated processes, integrated risk. So when you do your risk assessment, you have to use the same process and same methodology and the same rating. I'll explain to you why. Third is, of course, save money and time with integrated audits. Folks, I am not trying to say all your processes need to be integrated. In fact, I don't think they should be. But 70 to 95% of your processes need to be integrated, at least 30% of your work instructions. Let's just recall that, you know, most of our work instructions are on the shop floor. So you have to take your quality instructions, your environmental instructions, health and safety instructions, and integrate it for the operator, okay? And really 30% is laying the bar really low. All right. If you have both of those, you can say check one for integrated processes. Second check. If you want to save money, that's why you're going to integrated management systems, you need to have one process owner for that integrated process instead of multiple process owners. Third is, well, which I told you earlier, all processes do not have to be integrated. You have to decide which ones you want to integrate and which ones you don't want to integrate. All right. Next, you need to have a common risk methodology between what we call the Q, the E, the HS. When we say FS, we mean food safety, or when we say ITSMS, it's the IT security management systems, all right? And you need to have comparable severity and occurrence numbers. Don't forget, no matter what field you're in, whether enterprise risk, or whether you're looking at food risk, or whether you're looking at, product risk, always risk is, severity times occurrence. What is severity called sometimes? You'll see it by different names because there's I forget exactly how many we counted, but there's over 100 different risk standards out there, risk terminologies out there, and multiple risk standards. So you have to look at the word impact, or if you see the word occurrence, what is the other word for occurrence? Likelihood. When you see both of those, they're the same words, and always it is severity times occurrence. And then, of course, when you put controls in place, you can come up with another multiplier to identify the residual risk. All right, enough of that. Why do we want integrated risk? Simply said, if you want to compare the risk between Q, E, HS, ITSMS, you need to use the same methodology and, optimally one team for one subject matter. That they're working, if it's a product, if it's a manufacturing line, or if it's a lab, have the same cross-functional team do the Q, E, HS, and ITSMS risk, all right? And then you can come up with a number that you can say, you should be able to say, what is the highest risk item in my facility? All right. Now, why did I put this in? It comes from a paper I wrote actually many years ago for ASQ in Pathways to Social Responsibility. I wrote a paper on integration of social responsibility, ISO 26000 to ISO 14001 and ISO 9001. And folks, ISO 26000, social responsibility, is a guidance standard. So really, it is not similar to any of the other standards. What can you do with social responsibility standards? Really, you can do a risk assessment on the different subject matters coming out of ISO 26000, from human rights to community involvement and development, and you do your risk assessment, and from there, identify the relevant issues, subjects, come up with stakeholder expectations. You can come up with also a driver for this should be a social responsibility or your code of conduct, all right? Of course, the risks are not the same whether you have a site in the US versus Africa versus India versus China. Different risks for social responsibility, in different places. All right, next, what do we have? We have integrated audits. The use of one common audit process and audit program for one site. Well, actually, for the entire enterprise. It uses an integrated audit checklist. By the way, if you cannot do an integrated audit checklist and everybody's not so cognizant on all of the intricacies, all the standards, you can break up that role and put people into teams. All right. So what are the benefits of integration? Focus for the organization. I like to, if you go to some of the webinars I've done in the last 10 years, you will see a picture of an engineer, with his hair, her hair all out. It happens to be a picture for him. So I'll say his hair all out, who says, look, I don't do quality, I don't do environmental, I don't do health and safety, I just do my job. So that's the idea, that the person is doing the job. It is up to us designers of the systems to integrate that into the process, what that person does, all right? So number one, we said integration. So one of the things we also do is have integrating the Q, the E, and the HS goals and objectives into the overall organization's goals and objectives. Plus, of course, do that also with the processes, which provides focus. Efficiency, the number of processes reduced dramatically, including the number of process owners, and that itself saves a lot of time. And then, of course, effectiveness, right? If I have to look at 4 different processes to do my job, do you think I'm actually going to look at it? I'm not. All right. I also like to show a cartoon of the top management, and the top management says, "What? One more management review? I just did one for the quality. You mean I have to do one for environmental too? I have to do another one for health and safety?" You get the idea, right? You have to integrate the management reviews really into the business reviews of the organization. I'll go on to a long spiel of how to do that, so let me just go on. All right, so in this section, I've already told you that you need to integrate processes, integrate risk, and integrate audits, right? Here is a standalone system. What does this mean? This means this company has 4 manuals, 4 different set of processes. So they have training and competency 4 different times. They have document management, or as we say today, they have that in 4 different, documented 4 different times. They have, setting objectives in 4 different processes. In fact, when the idea of integrated management systems hit me strongly, and one of the case studies I talked about in the article I wrote, back in 2004, I wrote it about an electronics company in California with about 2,000 people with what they call business lines, which are small independent companies. They had 14 business lines in this campus, as they said. And business lines, there were BUs that broke into BLs, so that 14 BUs broken down into BLs, and every one of them was managed independently, and each of them had proliferated all these processes multiple times, all right? Just imagine the mess. So what do we mean by integration? In this one, we showed 2 manuals. Of course, folks, the manual is not important. You're going to have 4 different manuals. These are 4, from somewhere between 4 to 5 pages to 25 pages if you have old style manual. And, or you can integrate the manual as Omnex has done with its own manual. And then you need to have 1 set of processes. Folks, of course, there is a specific layer because ISO 14001 has some processes like emergency preparedness that doesn't integrate with everything else. Well, today it integrates with contingency planning that's in some QMSs, all right? So, but you can have specific processes that don't integrate, or you may have decided you don't want to integrate. Oftentimes, well, I'll tell you that in the next set of where I talk about standardization. So integrated processes, and then I already mentioned to you how to integrate work instructions, and then integrated forms and checklists.
Chad, let me.
Yes, please.
Sorry, let me jump in and just remind everybody out there we're about halfway through the presentation. Don't forget, everyone, use your Q&A box if you have any questions. We want to certainly have Chad answer your questions. We have a few already, but if you have more, get them in. Use that Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, or if you see that green pull-down menu at the top, click on that, and you'll get your Q&A box. One other thing I wanted to mention, Chad, you've mentioned several times articles you've written for us. After the presentation, if anyone wants to visit our site and see Chad's articles, he's got many on this topic and many others. So just check out qualitydigest.com, go to our search bar and type in content by Chad Keimel, and you'll get all of Chad's articles. So Chad, back to you.
Mike, if you recall, you guys used to have a magazine, and and I used to write for that. I've had people come up to me and say, "I thought you worked for Quality Digest." And
we've been blessed to have a lot of your content, no doubt. You've been very generous with your content to us.
Great. I'm going to make one comment here and give people a chance to write questions. So if you remember from my definition, one of the things I did in the book is I carefully went in and defined what is integration, what is standardization. So if you remember 70 to 100% of processes, at least 30% of the work instructions. I didn't even say anything about forms and checklists, all right? And if the manual is or is not integrated, we don't care, because that's really what we work with day in and day out are the processes and the work instructions and the forms and checklists. All right, with that, I will stop with this idea of integration and move on to integration and standardization. And let me pause here for a minute, okay, 1 minute. It'll seem like a long time, but it's just a minute.
And as Chad's pausing, again, just use that Q&A box if you do have questions. Some of you are already queued up with your questions. We want to certainly get to as many of them as we can. So if you do have them, use the Q&A box at the lower right-hand corner of your screen again, or if you see that green pull-down menu at the top, click on that, and you're going to get a Q&A button that you can click to open the Q&A box, and you can ask your questions of Chad. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation here coming up in about 20 or 25 minutes.
I don't think that's nearly even a minute, about maybe 45 seconds or so, and I'm going to continue, all right? So, very importantly, we defined what is the IMS. Now, I'm going to extend. I don't hear anybody talking about this, the idea of integration and standardization. So this is what we encounter as we look at companies everywhere. And a lot of it is a lack of top management support or understanding of the savings to be gotten. So here you have lack of integration. Lack of integration is horizontal, and if you go vertical, it's lack of standardization. So the design center, the plant, and the warehouse, and ... plant X have all different processes. What do I find in real life? I find people, the quality manager and the design center, well, the design center is unique. Plant X borrowed from plant 1 and plant 5 and redid the quality manual, redid the processes, redid the procedures. Of course, today, folks, the work we have done has paid off. Many of you are starting to do both integration and standardization, but I do need to just make the point, integration is not enough, and you need integration and standardization. All right. So I just said this here, integration refers to standalone systems that duplicate training processes, document control, internal audits, setting objectives, you name the process, they are duplicating it within one site. And then, of course, they're duplicating it again between the sites, which we call standardization. And so you can just imagine the confusion and the waste when this happens, both lack of integration and lack of standardization. Folks, I'm showing you an ideal system. You don't get here without somebody, a very, very strong champion who is supported by the president. Because if people ask me, we have been doing integration and standardization. I'll say this, Mike, though I published ISO 14001 and ISO 9001 in 2004 with Quality Digest, I wrote an article for AIAG's magazine. I forget it's called, I think Informed Outlook. In 1996, we did, today, before it was called Kelsey-Hayes, which became TRW, became Lucas Verity, that became TRW, and today is ZF. We integrated, we did, I'll just call it standardization. We helped them with QS 9000, and we rolled out one standardized process, all over North America. They were not global, and/or the people we worked with were not global. That itself was a challenge. That was the first implementation Omnex did. That was in 1996. And I wrote about it in, it was in 1995 that we started, as soon as the QS 9000 standard. Today it's called IATF 16949, folks, all right? So the idea of going to this idealized system on the right-hand side is ideal, but of course that's not real life. So if you're starting the process, what I tell people, because sometimes people ask us to do it wham bam, and you don't get the benefits. Because the processes are the value-added ways that you run the business, the new product development process, the objective setting process, the performance management process. They should be done with great care. So what would I advise you after having gone through now hundreds of integration and standardization? I would say pick a couple that you want to standardize and do a good job. Let the goal not be integration and standardization. Let the goal be really excellent processes that provide you value added. All right, let's move on. So this is the savings, download that. I've written it up much nicer here, in the executive primer, because the way to get to top management is about savings. So here's what we say: in an enterprise of 4 sites with 3 management systems. Now today it's 4 management systems, as I mentioned. All your companies are putting in IT security or cyber security. Worse yet, if they're just putting cybersecurity controls without processes, right? So anyway, if they have 100, on average, 100 processes, we have 4 times 3, 12 times 100. We have 1,200, okay, I guess I did not go with that high a number. You get an idea here. So it's 4 sites with 3 management systems. 4 3 is 12, and then you have to multiply it by the average number of processes. All right. I think I may have done only. I forget now what my multiplier was, but it is a huge number of processes. I think I said 100. So 1,200 processes. What happens when you integrate and standardize? It boils down to 100. Of course, even if you don't get 100, even if you get a 200, it's a 6-to-1 advantage. Now, next, if you have 1,200 process owners and you reduce it to 100 process owners, think about the savings just in that, okay? This is why even if you have already implemented it, if you don't get the implementation savings, you'll get the maintenance savings if you start on the path of integration and standardization. All right, so let's pick up the speed here a little bit. I think this section goes quite quickly. The process approach, and really the process map. We all know the process map is not a required document, but most of you, for sequence and interaction, and to identify the processes of the organization, you do a process map. Very good. So what I'd like to tell people is, look, we are, as a company, we are the processes in the company, all right? It just makes no sense if you have a different set of processes for Q and a different set of processes for E and a different set of processes for HS, all right? So we are who we are, which means one set of processes. And all the standards are shalls, all right? So when you look at these shalls, whether they change or existing shalls, what you do is you ask the question, if you take a shall, you say, what process satisfies the shall? Once you ask that, there's only a couple of outcomes. You say, number one, you say this process does and it satisfies it. Good, you're done. Or you say this process does it, but it doesn't satisfy it, and you have to change it, all right? Third, you can say, I don't have a process, right? Those are 3 different outcomes with these shalls. And and that's what the slide is saying, that the process approach is the key to integration. So the process maps, I've got more to say about enterprise process maps and about, you know, maybe I don't have it here. The idea of the processes connecting up the sites and so on, but that's another presentation, all right? So here, let me just say, a process map documents a process in enterprise. It provides a uniform way for the business to operate. It allows linkages between results or key measurables and process measurables. It represents a uniform look and feel to our customers and suppliers. I'll just go on here. Let's move on. I didn't have a slide on processes, but today, Omnex is documenting each of these processes in a flow. We say who does what, when in that flow, all right? Let me finish up here and yet have hopefully a few minutes. You know, Mike, I've been typically going a little bit over 3 o'clock, and we'll try to do the same here just to answer a few additional questions if we can.
Yeah, it looks like we have about 4 or 5 in. So, yeah, take your time, but we'll get to it at the end.
Okay. So, best-in-class integrated management systems. So, what we'll try to do here is what we've defined. What is a best-in-class integrated management systems? And I've already defined some of these, but I want to come back and concisely say, what do we think? Number one, it integrates and standardizes, okay? Standardization and integration. It does management systems, we should have said processes. It does risk and audits, all right? That's item one. Item two is it does integration and standardization of 5 topics: QMS, EMS, OHSAS, IT security, and social responsibility. And of course, if you have food safety and you do food safety for companies in the food industry, we did a very large implementation for a Swiss large food manufacturer many years ago that included QMS, FSMS, EMS, and OHSAS, right? And they did that before the high-level structure. Third is implementation of key performance indicators or key measurables with using this BOSS methodology that aligns KPIs, objectives, context, and interested party expectation. This is a methodology we wrote in many years ago for Ford Motor Company, and we implemented in many, many, many different companies, all right, organizations globally. We have updated this methodology to be satisfy the high-level structure, okay? And then one other thought is a net positive, net zero that I'll present to you. And the fourth best-in-class idea that all of the companies I'm talking to today needs to adopt is electronic workflow. IMS software. How do we manage with one process owner? By having an electronic workflow. Let's move on to the next slide. So again, this is a picture on the integrated management systems, the 3 different, you know, what's holding up the roof of the integrated management systems. Okay. Oops, sorry. And then the idea of integration and standardization. Next, what we want to talk about in this best-in-class is the enterprise performance measurement. Folks, very near and dear. I gave many years of my life in terms of implementing this methodology that links business objectives and interested party expectations to the objectives of the organization, into KPIs, into processes with process measurables. So what do we need to do? We need to identify the vital few measurables that measure the pulse of the organization. And these KPIs are vital to the success of the organization. Remember, a good management system will have a good performance management system. And it's a methodology to drive customer-focused and interested party expectations. And it'll have standards for running. It'll have a standard, meaning how do you run a business review across the organization? How do you do visual management across the organization? All right. And then there's a link between results and processes through your process map. Let me show it to you visually. Now, if you are following us, you have seen me present this multiple times. I don't know, folks, what you're using to implement the high-level structure. Here is a tried and true methodology in terms of context, interested party expectations, mission, vision, policies, driving the intended results, 6.1, of the goals and objectives of the organization, which is measuring your KPI that goes into your management review. And the KPIs need to identify key processes, process KPIs, and then the improvement action. So let me ask you the question, why don't we see improvement actions next to the results? Because most of you have got action plans tied to the results, PPM, on-time delivery, preventive maintenance. You're you're writing the actions right to the KPIs. And this is what this methodology says. This methodology says results are the result of how processes interact. If you don't identify the key processes that drive the results, you can't really improve. Number two, we'll say this because all of you are improving, is that when you put an action plan, in your mind, you're actually identifying the driver, process driver that's driving the result. But in your management team, everybody's not thinking alike because we haven't clearly shown the key process, the process KPI, and the improvement action. So let me just say this. So if you close the gap in the process KPI, it'll drive the performance KPI or the result, helping us meet our goal and objective that will help us satisfy interested party expectations within the context of the organization. All right. Then, folks, working with Wayne, this is what we believe is best in class today. We all didn't believe in zero defects in the 1980s. Well, today, whole large organizations that Omnex works with are in the low PPMs of 5 to 10 PPM or in the parts per billion. I have customers I've worked with for the last 15, 20 years that are in parts per billion. So the idea of zero defect really works, but today what we're saying is zero defects is not enough. You need to have this idea of net zero or net positive. What is that? Zero energy, zero carbon, zero water, zero waste, zero human rights violations, zero labor infringements, zero corruption. This is taking the idea of zero across the board in the Q, E, HS, social responsibility, IT security. All right. This is just a picture of the business operating system, in terms of what we're measuring in the top of the house, or the KPI for top management is on-time delivery. And we're saying on-time delivery is driven by maintenance, downtime, scheduling accuracy, production, if the production rate goes up, and percent day shipments. I don't like that last one. That last one is not a good driver. But you get the idea. You improve the process measurable, like schedule accuracy or downtime, that will help you improve your percent on time, okay? All right, here's another tool that we consider best in class, using the control plan that we use in manufacturing to manage these KPIs for the processes. The key performance indicators at the very top, and then the KPIs for the processes. Folks, the fourth idea that we said is best in class. So the first one was integration and standardization. The second one was the BOSS and the net zero. And now I forget my third one. And this is the fourth one, which is the electronic workflows, all right? So we have here the integrated management systems functionality, new product development functionality. Best in class says you do APQP and PPAP. If this is, along with problem solving, is what has driven companies into the low PPMs. And of course, you got to manage your supply chain. So this is a functionality, and these are the processes suitable for electronic workflow, all right? And I carefully picked these out as processes that will help you standardize across the board in your globe. And folks, let me just say this, at Omnex, I told you we work on things that we're interested in. These are some Omnex software, so there are other software out there. This is something Omnex does. We have an enterprise integrated management system. We have an APQP and functional safety ISO 26262 suite, along with PPAP. The linked DFMEA's test plans, process flow, PFMA control plans is something we started out in the 1980s. So I'll just segue here that, you know, there are some key ideas that are near and dear to what we do here at Omnex. And I'm going to share that with you in the very end. And one of them, of course, is these linked documents, which today everybody has accepted. But for about 15, 20 years, folks, we were preaching to deaf ears, right? And then, of course, supplier quality management. These are the electronic workflows that we need to be looking at and we need to have. Folks, I think I did a pretty good job here, and I think I have about a little less than 10 minutes. So let me go and summarize what we just talked about. IMS constitutes, as we said, integrated processes, integrated risk, and integrated audits. And integration is focused on integrated, okay, so second thing you can do is, the two ways you can do integration. You can integrate what we said is best in class is QMS, EMS, OHSAS, and FSMS, or some people's challenge is just integrating QMS. So I have companies in the electronics industry who are supplying multiple markets, and they have to integrate IATF 16949, which is automotive, ISO 13485, ISO 9001, of course, AS 9100, and their list goes on. So integration means both. Standardization is as important, and it's about flowing standardized processes globally. And then also the message we had is best-in-class IMS implementations have the following: integrated and standardized management systems, integrated risks, integrated audits. And number two, we said what to integrate and standardize, which is QMS, EMS, OHSAS, IT security and social responsibility. Third, the idea of the BOSS methodology that links KPIs to objectives, to context, to interested party expectations. And the idea of net positive, net zero. And lastly, the idea of electronic workflows. Today, folks, it's got to be a top item in your agenda. Here are some key takeaways that I've been talking about now for a long time. The definition of IMS as 3 items. Integration is not enough. You need to have integration and standardization. Let me just take a sip of water here. The BOSS methodology that links the results to the processes, to the objectives, and so on. Taking the idea of zero defects and flowing it out into environmental, health and safety, and social responsibility. The idea of the business management system control plans and electronic workflows. With that, let me just finish up by telling you about a couple of books that are my most recent books. One on the integrated management systems that I talked to you about, and also how to audit ISO 9001 2015, different risk courses, and again, our integrated management systems course are not, just limited to what you're saying. We do the complete gamut of all the combinations companies are looking for. IATF courses, we have ISO 9001 courses, 14001 courses, 45001 courses, and so on. So what we'll do now is let's take some questions, Mike.
Yeah, Chad, good job. Wow, that was a lot of information in a short period of time. We do have a few questions from some folks who want to know a little bit more about this, so let me run through them with you. First one, this came in early. My manager, who is new to quality, wants me to develop an audit matrix between ISO 9001, Responsible Care Management System, and Operational Excellence, which is mainly a safety-related audit and management system, so that we take advantage of commonalities in the three management systems during an audit. I like this, but it's just a small slice of the integrated management systems approach. We are also certified to ISO 14001, IATF 16949, OHSAS 18001, and ISO 27001, among others. How do I convince my manager that the integrated management system approach has a lot more benefit than just doing a fraction of it? What are the approximate dollar savings a global company with about 18,000 employees and 70 locations globally would realize? I need some talking points to convince him and senior management. Ooh, long question there. A lot.
Absolutely. It's a lot. So, you know, number one, I'll just say this. You don't start down the integrated management systems route by an integrated audit. Remember, you know, if those topics are actually integrated, then an integrated audit really will help, okay? But that's not the whole point of the question. The point of the question is they need to start, you know, their opportunities are huge. So let me just say this. Number one, get my executive primer. It's free. And please give that to your manager as a start. And then, of course, you need to he or she, along with you, needs to influence higher up in the company to your top executive. You know, sometimes, you know, if it's only in a plant, you start doing integrated management systems in the plant, and then you can go higher up into the corporation. But very short, you know, in a 4-site, just integration in one site, we came up with a savings of $730,000. So you yourself can come up with what is your maintenance cost for your management system, 3 different management systems or 4 different management systems, and ask the question, you know, if you made it one management system with one set of processes and one process owner, how much you save. And you have to do what is called a net present value. And the amount of money you save is immense. The second stream is an integrated risk, okay? And then integrated audits. And it's a huge number. And for a 4-site, we came up with $4.4 million. You can look at how we came up with, and especially if you have 18,000 people, and how many sites, Mike?
That was 70 sites, 70.
70 sites. It's a huge number, millions and millions of dollars. So it's a great opportunity to have, and you know, lots of money to be saved. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, good job there, Chad. Okay.
I'll just say one more thing, which I forgot to say, Mike. Sorry. So start with the paper. Then you need to get an executive overview as the next start, and then go maybe with a training class for the team, and then you need to get a set of people behind you. Sorry, Mike, I meant to say that, and I forgot that in the flow of things. Please go ahead with the second question.
No worries. So are auditors able to consolidate their audits across the different standards? We've had some resistance around availability of auditors qualified to audit against 3 or 4 standards.
I agree. So sometimes what companies do is talk to their registrar, and the registrar tells them not to do it. All right? And the reason they say not to do it is, number one, the number of days of an integrated audit, number of days that they can charge goes down. Number two, there's not enough skilled people. How do I know this? Well, I ran a registrar, and it's a registrar I ran for about 10 years. And we had 16 different auditors who knew QMS, EMS, and OHSAS. And I think at that time we had the largest number because that was our, you know, it's my pet thing. So I really pushed that. So, but I do know that's the biggest problem is availability of auditors. And when you go ask a registrar, they are not in favor because of the, you know, what the aforesaid reason. So that's what I have to say, Mike, on that. That is a problem.
Thank you. It is a problem. Third question, can you please explain the specific processes that management would not like to integrate and under what situations? So I guess that's kind of asking the reverse of your presentation. You know, are there things that would be excluded from integration?
You know, I'm thinking hard now. When we do our integration, lots of times it's individual, you know, management systems owners in the different sites who claim that process is so unique and so much better. Theirs is the process everybody should adopt. That's the biggest hindrance I see to implementations. That's why you need to have a strong executive driving it. But let me, you know, those are the stories that come to my mind are the people who don't allow integration in their site because of a belief theirs is better and they know better than everyone else. Let me just say this, you know, as we have just now, as I mentioned to you, done integrated management systems in the U.S. and we'll be flowing it out. I can just imagine, and we have 5 offices in China. I can just imagine the pushback I get from my China office, but you know, I am the the top person in the organization, so I'm able to push it. But even so, I can see them giving different reasons. So one valid reason would be in sales and the sales process, because you can imagine customers are different, so that would be a valid reason. And other than that, you know, you can also say, so when we talk about integration, a lot of people, Mike, immediately go to the details. They go to the details of why things can integrate, and just remember, it's a process that we're trying to integrate. It's an overall process of what we do as an organization. And the enterprise processes that connects the organization can all be integrated easily.
So you're saying there's certainly a lot more room for inclusivity rather than exclusivity in this process.
Yes, and you know, and I would go into the big money saver processes first, get top management's buy-in, explain the huge savings from doing those, and then go with it, with that blessing.
Got it. Here's a good one. Do you believe that ISO will eventually issue a quote-unquote integration standard? Will it be necessary? I'm not sure what exactly the viewer, the listener means by an integration standard. Maybe you can unpack that for us a little bit.
Well, you know, I'm on all these different committees, ISO committees, and there is like a guidance standard that's going to, you know, not a standard, but a guidance primer that's going to come out. I forget now exactly what it's called, but there is something floating around in a draft form right now. Okay, so you'll get some guidance, but really, folks, integration, and they won't talk about integrated risk or integrated audits. They'll just talk about integration. They won't talk about standardization. All right, keep all that in mind as you grow across, because I've tried to explain to you carefully about integration and standardization, and I want your standards to be high. All right, integration and standardization is not difficult, folks. So the answer is yes, there will be stuff coming out, but don't expect it to be cutting edge.
Got it. All right, let's see here. I think we have time for one more. Let's see if I can unpack this one myself. Why, or I think the user maybe means how can a company have one integrated manual? Is it that one of the reasons is that the respective external auditor cannot deal with it to verify that their adherence to the respective standards? So I guess the question is what's the call for a single integrated manual?
Sorry, say that. What is the?
I think the question really, the heart of the question is what is the value proposition for an integrated manual?
So as I mentioned to you, the level 1 is one of those. I said if you want to, you can integrate. If you don't want to, you don't need to integrate. You know, and the only reason I say that is it's the pointer to the processes. So if you want to keep that separate, you can. But at Omnex, we chose to completely integrate it into one manual. And keep in mind now, there are no requirements in any of the standards. As I said, I'll come back and explain there are in some. There are no requirements in any of the standards for a quality manual except, of course, IATF has a couple, and AS 9100 has a section. Even then, it's very loose. So, folks, yes, you can nicely integrate it, but the value is not quite there, other than, here's how I've always thought of the quality manual. It's actually it's a document, I say, for my customer. So I make it the prettiest looking document showing how great our company is, and who's our organization, where are we, what are the things we do, and as a document to send to my customer to increase their trust and belief in Omnex, okay? And in that, we explain our entire process map and the processes that give us the integration and the standardization. So that's what it's there for, and the value comes from communication. Again, that's what that's the value. But the biggest value in terms of the millions of dollars of savings comes from process integration and standardization.
Let's do one more before we call it a day here. Can you integrate IATF 16949 and ISO 9001:2015 together as one QMS that can be certified by a third party? We have customers from both automotive and other industries.
And the answer is absolutely yes.
Good.
And if you're doing automotive, they also have 14001 because it's a requirement for the automotive industry. And the answer is that for that also is yes. I'll go one more. You may want to do ISO 17025, which is a lab quality management system standard. You can integrate that too to a large degree. So,
excellent.
And I can go on.
Well, no, Chad,
we have to do ISO 26262, which is functional safety, depending on your electronics company, also which we have successfully integrated.
Well, the real takeaway here is that folks that are managing many different standards really do have this option. This integration option is one they really should investigate and really understand. I think you gave us a really good high-level overview of that today, Chad, so thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, everyone.
Of course.
Take care now. Thanks.
Of course. Well, that's the end of our webinar. I'll just mention before we let Chad go, if we didn't get to your question today, Chad is going to get back to you offline if you have other questions. We had a couple we didn't get to. So thanks again, Chad, for that great presentation. Thanks to all of you out there for joining us. You're going to be receiving an email with a link to a recording of this webinar within about a day. So look for that email, which will have a link to the PDF of the slides seen in this webinar as well. Keep your eyes open for that. So on behalf of all of us at Quality Digest and Omnex, we wish you a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next webinar. So long.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks all.
Thank you, Chad.
Bye-bye.
Bye.